Hello there, I'm Mary Jo Gordon, and I am going to be doing a personal presentation for the Interpersonal Communications class at Liberty University, class number HSCO 508, with Dr. Tammy Fry as our professor. One thing I've learned from this class is the importance of understanding my behavioral blends to identify who I am. And we might ask, what are behavioral blends? Well, behavioral blends come from a theory that's been introduced and used in um, a lot of psychological circles and counseling circles um, and religious circles also. And it deals with Dr. Carbonell's four personality types. And the first slide talks about the behavioral blends. And what we found for me after my analysis and taking the examination or the survey that was online, I did find that I was an S personality type, and that what that means is that I feel that people expect me to be sensitive. They expect me to be supportive. I feel that people want me to blend in with the crowd and to be reserved and easygoing. And for the most part, that is kind of what I believe. But what I found was a great conflict because what I what I really am is a lot different. I'm someone who they might classify as being an overachiever, and it seems to be my downfall because in my attempts to want to be the best that I can be in all four types, and having that ability to blend in as all four types doesn't always serve me well or the people that I'm communicating with. Um, Being an overachiever, sometimes I try to do too much, and when I try to do too much, as I have been, I sometimes set my own self up for failure, and I recognize that within myself. So with the next slide, I realized that I have to really develop a personal goal for myself, and that deals with me directly identifying and becoming aware of my personality and the internal and external conflict that exists and goes along with it that make me do some of the things that I do, make me behave the way I do. Um, I feel like if I understand and I'm more aware, I'll do better when it comes to communicating. And when I think about enlarging my conversation, it just means that I really need to be a little bit better at developing my listening skills. I need to listen. I need to um, make sure that I'm interpreting things right and that what's being said to me is also heard the right way. And it takes time. What I've learned in this class is that it's going to require me to really hone up on my listening skills. Um, I always thought that there was really important to be able to speak well, but what I've learned and what I've learned in this class is that listening actually is much more important. Listening is going to get me a lot farther, especially when it comes to me and my personal goal of becoming a counselor. One thing that we read about in Stewart was that communication and quality of life are somewhat linked, and I think there is a definite correlation between that. When you think about relationships, marriages, I've been married before. I can put some. There's definitely a link to the ability that my husband and I had to communicate, and how it ran over into the quality of life we shared together. There was a lot of misunderstanding, hurt feelings, and other issues um, that were probably there in my spouse that I didn't really notice or pay attention to. And perhaps if I had been listening to what he was really saying, I would have been aware of some of those things. Um, I think about some of the confrontations that took place in the movie Fireproof, and the way the communication took place between that husband and wife. There was a lot of speaking on both parts. No one really was listening to what the other person was saying. So when I think about that and think about my life, then I go back to the influences on my communication, the influence on my conversation, and some of the positive influences had to do with being of mixed heritage, African American and Hispanic, and I would include in that being raised in a two-parent home at least until I was age 14. I couple that with being a middle child. It did help me become a little bit independent. I learned how to do things and do them alone without it being a big issue. Um, I think that my mother being mild mannered and soft spoken had a great influence on me and how I should interact with those around me. And with that being said, I would also say that my mother, she is a great influence on my life. She's 88 years old and she gets along well. She does a lot of reading. She does a lot of um, interacting with her friends, and she is very soft-spoken and family-oriented. At this, along with that, I guess I could say that some of the negative influences on my conversation, stemming from my background, would be the discrimination that I faced growing up. Um, Also, growing up in this state of Iowa, where the overall population today is 3.3% African American, but I know that growing up years ago, population of African Americans, I think, might have been maybe 1%. And I'm 54 years old, so I think going back to my childhood would, yeah, 1% of the population, and that had a lot to do with how I saw myself as an African American woman as I was growing up. And then also being a child of divorce. My parents did divorce when I was 14. And as is common, there were feelings of, oh, maybe self doubt, feeling unworthy, feeling responsible for what went on between my parents. All played a role in my development of a very low self esteem. Um, and because of that low self esteem, I guess I didn't really speak a lot. I did a lot of keeping things internal and stuffing, not really communicating well with others of how I feel and what I'm really thinking. Um, so some of the barriers that developed from that in the next slide are the ones that really, uh, I guess, like I said, development of a low self-esteem, um, being vulnerable, and that led to me being susceptible to bad influences, outside influences. And then some of the bad influences also led to me making some bad choices. But over the years, I've learned that the next slide shows by being more aware and increasing your self awareness, you can change your life. And I was able to do that by just kind of, as is mentioned in Burley Allen, plotting my own belief system, noting the process, taking note of how I think and how I behave based on how I think. And then again, including in some of my own perceptions and misconceptions of situations and circumstances. Um, Kind of taking note of internal dialogue and how it had an effect on me and my attitude. And in the next slide, what I needed to really do about that is identify my own personal beliefs, identify my weaknesses, um, and try to learn to adapt with them. I think maybe I spent quite a few years of my life not really thinking about who I was and what I wanted. And I became a little stagnant in my life and trying to play catch up now. And it's very challenging. Um, but I did have to make some decisions early on in my life that would take me out of an area where I could raise my kids in a more diverse community. And I made decisions to go back to school that kind of helped me come out of my shell. To a certain degree, you're forced to come out when you're trying to pursue your education. And what I found with that is that there's a level of confidence that comes with at least knowing who you are, because you know where to make the changes. When you're a little bit confident of yourself, you are more secure in self-disclosure. The next slide. we're talking about some of the internal and external solutions to the noise pollution. And internally, I guess for me, it's just kind of being cognizant of my own personal biases, recognizing the importance of being non-judgmental, um, watching how I can kind of be um, more alert and I need to be more attentive. That would also help me when it comes to my internal things, internal solutions for noise pollution. Externally, I guess I just need to pay attention sometimes to the rate that I'm speaking, my body language, some of the verbal cues that could come across, making sure that I'm selecting a place and a time that's proper for communication and a conversation, and then taking into consideration that finding a place that allows me to eliminate outside noises and interferences, and making sure I've got the right time, the right place, and that I'm doing and saying the right things. Overall, in conclusion, I would just say that it's been a good class. Um, I didn't do nearly as well as I know I could have or should have. And in the end, I'm just hopeful to get this final presentation done. And hopefully what will be will be.